下来我们即将进入的是主题演讲环节。首先有请派拉蒙首席未来学家 Schilowitz 来到舞台，为我们带来主题演讲。有请。
Good morning. So my name is Ted. Probably noticed that I'm a pretty casual dresser. So my speech will also be fairly casual. Plus we're going to do some fun and interesting things. So we're going to be here for about an hour to talk about some interesting things. First thing I'm going to ask you to do is everybody please stand up for me. Stand up. We're going to do a little experiment. We're going to do a small experiment. Okay, so I'm going to make a futurist prediction. Now, I've done this prediction all around the world, but this is the first time I've done it in China. So we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to make a prediction that everybody here, including the staff and everybody behind the cameras, has a pocket robot in their pocket. You may call it a smartphone. If you have one, hold it up, nice and high. Let's see if we're 100% correct. Everybody got one? Everybody hold it up. Okay, step 2 of the experiment. Take your pocket robot or your smartphone and swap it with your neighbor. I need you to come help me. We're going to swap. Swap your phone with your neighbor. We'll see how this goes. You're going to give me your phone, and I'm going to give you your phone. Yes. So we're demonstrating a little experiment here. Now, take the phone. I'm giving her my phone. She's taking my phone. I'm taking your phone. Take your new phone, put it in your pocket or your purse. And now have a seat. Now, see how that feels. Does that feel a little uncomfortable? A little bit concerning? Are you worried you lost something more than just your phone? You are correct. So we're going to be exploring that over the next hour, that feeling that is actually happening to you now. And what is occurring that is different than just technology. That's what we're going to talk about. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is this. So imagine that tonight, one of us ended up in prison, in jail. If my friends from America are here, put your hands up. This is clearly the ones that are going to end up in jail. Now, if you ended up in jail tonight, now in America, if you go to jail, they take your phone away. The same in China? Who would you call if you didn't have your robot, your pocket phone? Because your robot knows all the numbers. You don't know any numbers anymore. Your second brain knows the numbers. It's an important thing to think about. Now, we drive a lot in the United States. You drive a lot in China, right? Think about the last time you drove anywhere without using a navigation system. You probably use WeChat for this, right? Because we use WeChat for everything, right? WeChat navigation. So we don't drive anywhere without a second brain teaching us how to drive. And this is part of what has changed in our brain chemistry. And this is part of what I study in my work. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Now I like this quote. It's probably translated somewhat accurately here. This is from a famous movie cowboy. So I work in the movie business. It's from a famous movie cowboy about 100 years ago. He says, even if you're on the right track, you will get run over if you just sit there. Meaning, a conference like this is a very important step. Because even if people are thinking about change and working to execute change, if you don't actually put people together to actually start moving the ball forward, making progress, you will get run over. And in our country, compared to other countries, we've seen this happen over and over and over again. So a big part of my job is to make sure we don't just think about things, but we actually do things. We actually put things into practice. Now, in terms of the phone that is no longer yours in your pocket, I want you to think about this. So this is some statistics from 5 years ago. Most people check their smartphone within 15 minutes of waking up. That was 5 years ago. I would venture to say today, 2018, you check your phone within the first 90 seconds of waking up. Do you agree? Put your hand up if you agree. Right? 5 years ago, 80% of people said it was the very first thing they did in the morning. Today, it's the first thing you do in the morning, right? 80% of them said they had their phone on them all but 2 hours of their working day. That was 5 years ago. Think about today. How often do you not have your phone with you? Maybe when you're in the shower. That's it. And you're usually sleeping right next to it. So these are interesting things to think about. Here's some other interesting statistics. Most people check their phones now 150 times a day. Most young adults, there's a group of young adults I was taking selfies with over there, send an average of 110 texts a day. It's probably more like 400 or 500 texts a day, actually. There are more cell phones on planet Earth than toothbrushes, which is kind of interesting. Now, if you lost your wallet, this thing that some of us still carry, if you lost this, on average, it takes you about 1 full day to report that you lost this. If you lost this, it takes you about 1.5 hours to report that you lost this. This is way more important than your wallet now. This is connected to us in really interesting ways that I don't think anybody really ever intended. Okay, now I want you to watch something, okay? Here we go. This has sound.
If you're going to be texting and walking, I'm a seeing eye person, I can help you walk and text.
Excuse me, I see you're texting. I can clear a path for you.
If you'd like to walk and text, we're here for you. Excuse me, sir. If you're going to be texting and walking, can you grab out? Good. So you barely paying attention.
Excuse me, pardon me, text or walking. Coming through.
It's funny, huh? It's a sort of point about where we are as a society. Okay, so that's my introduction, just to get you started. Now, what I study as a field of study is something I refer to as the 10-year curve. I study things that are not today and not tomorrow, but cultivating over a period of time that we refer to as a 10-year curve. And this is an interesting field of study, I think. It makes me happy when I wake up in the morning and this is what I get to do for a job, is try and figure this out, where the next 10 years are going. So, I'll tell you a little bit about my past in a minute, my personal past, and what a futurist does, because I have a very strange job at a movie studio. I'm the futurist at the movie studio. But really what a futurist is they're a pastist. We actually look backwards to see where things are going in the future. And you can make very accurate predictions if you spend enough time looking at what happened in the past. So if you look at these statistics, it's really interesting. These are US-based statistics, but I'm sure they're relevant in China too, probably just a slightly different timeline. In the 1950s, about 10% of the people in the United States had this thing called a television set. In 10 years, over a 10-year curve of time, almost nobody had a television set to almost everybody had a television set. Almost 90%. So from 10% to 90% in 10 years. That's how fast technology changed. We rounded it out in the next 10-ish years to the point where almost everyone on the planet, with very few exceptions, had a television. Now, especially for some of those young kids in college that are sitting over there, can you imagine a day, because it is coming, when you will live inside a house, be inside work environments, where you will have no need for a television, for something like this, or this that I'm looking at, or all the computers, or anything that we refer to as a television. Who can imagine that? I can very clearly imagine it, and that's kind of what I'm working on right now, is where is this going? Are we at the last age of what we call physical displays? I believe we are, and we're going to talk about that. You have a VPN here, right, so you can see YouTube? Yeah? Okay, so we know YouTube, right? This is the very, very first YouTube video. This was about 10 years ago. Now I've been giving this talk for about 2 years, so now it's about 12 years old. This is the very first.
Cool thing about these guys is that they have really long fronts.
So I don't know if anybody could have predicted that this would have created a media revolution. That is a massive economic force, a massive social force, a massive cultural force. The very first video was this kid, My Day at the Zoo in San Diego, California. It's true. 1 year later, that was 2005, 1 year later, this other startup called Google bought this startup, YouTube, for $1.6 billion. Not a small sum of money back then. Still not a small sum of money. Now about 10 years later, okay, studying the 10-year curve. YouTube has 1 billion users. About the same as the amount of people that live in China, right? Almost a third of people that touch the internet every day watch 1 billion hours of video on YouTube every day. YouTube has local versions in almost every country on the planet, and now this statistic is actually old. It's 400 hours now. 400 hours every minute are put on YouTube for people to watch. Here's some other statistics. About 10 years later. The top 100 viewed videos on YouTube have exceeded 1 billion views. That's a lot of eyeballs. 21 of them have exceeded 2 billion, 4 of them exceeded 3 billion, and one video today has exceeded 5 billion views. There's only 7.5 billion people on planet Earth. Does anybody know what that is, that video is? Correct. Despacito. Anybody seen it in China? I'm sure you've seen it because 5 billion people have seen it. Now, this is a cultural phenomenon which I think is starting to maybe happen in China, but it's a huge, huge thing in many places around the world. It started in the United States. Anybody here know about Netflix? You've heard about Netflix? You know about it? Yeah, okay. So this is a couple of 10-year curves. This is the study of 10 years at a time. So, started in 1997 by 2 guys literally working in an apartment. 10 years later, they ship 1 billion DVD, but they're still using what they call physical media over that 10-year period. However, they didn't call their company Mailflix, even though they were mailing DVDs. They called their company Netflix, because they thought at some point along that curve that we would have the need for physical media would diminish to the point where it would almost go away and then completely go away. 10 years later, we have 100, now I think we're about 130 million subscribers of this service. And it is a force to be reckoned with in the entertainment business. Paramount produces a lot of shows for Netflix. We make a lot of television shows for Netflix. 10 years and then 10 years. Now, I think this is interesting, and I think this is interesting from a Chinese perspective too about innovation. Because if you think about it, the most powerful companies on the planet didn't start out with aspirations of being very powerful companies. They started out by being little startups in garages. So all of these companies, which you probably recognize some of these people if you know who they are, started as a hobby. You know what a hobby, the term hobby, it makes sense to translate? It's a hobby, it's not a business. They were trying to accomplish a goal. They were trying to solve a problem. They thought it was interesting. They never thought they would be billionaires or trillionaires, which is what's coming with some of these companies. They just were trying to solve a problem. So I'm going to show you a clip of something that is a very popular show in the United States. It's a show called Silicon Valley. And it is really about the revolution of technology and kind of where it comes from. So I'm going to show you this clip. This has some sound.
Birthplace of Hui, Peter Gregory's mother's garage.
That was Peter's workstation.
This was mine. Things sure have changed. But in a way, they've stayed exactly the same. As we forge our new path together, we must remain focused on what's really important. Not material success or wealth, but this, the spirit of innovation. A few coders, some ramen, and a dream. And that is why I brought you here. All right, let me show you the rest of the place.
Garage inside your garage. Impressive.
It's good, right? Oh, loud. Okay. I got a technology upgrade while I was backstage. So I think this is interesting. It's poignant, actually, even though it's comical, comedy, is that the idea of starting with something which is the essence of something, and then it turns into something a little unexpected. The trappings of wealth are not why people start these businesses. They start these businesses because they want to make progress. They want to accomplish something for the human race. So, interestingly enough, because it's sort of a Chinese reference, maybe Japanese, Chinese, I guess it's the same in terms of reference. When I meet with startup companies at my movie studio I work at, and I ask them, how are they doing as a company? What I'm really focusing on is how much of a startup really are they? Where did they put their money that they raised from their investors? Did they buy a fancy office? Did they get fancy clothes? Or did they really focus on what they're trying to accomplish? So I very often ask them, in a very serious way, I look at these young startups and I say, when was the last time you ate ramen? They look at me and say, I need to know when the last time you ate ramen was. And if they say, oh, we ate ramen 3 times this past week, I'm like, you're a startup, I will invest in. If they tell me they haven't eaten ramen in the last 3 years, I'm like, you guys are paying attention to the wrong things. Does that make sense to you? Maybe not. I don't know if it translates, but it's an important thing for me. So we eat a lot of ramen in our world. Okay, let's talk about technology companies that have made an impact. Anybody remember this? So this started in 1995, and it was really the beginnings of what we call the commercialization of the internet. Then, a couple years later, this came around, about a year later, right around the same time. This thing called CompuServe. So there are some people in the audience over there that come from the US that know all about CompuServe. This was our first entree into what we call the internet. But I want you to pay attention to the number. So people in the US think that everybody was on CompuServe. But actually the numbers are very, very modest. So the numbers at its absolute highest peak subscribership were 3.6 million people. That was the people that were on CompuServe. It made a massive social impact and a massive technological impact, but the actual amount of people that really accessed it was very, very small, and that's going to become important later as we talk a little bit about the next wave of technology. I just want you to remember that number, 3.6 million. Then, all of us in the US remember this. And maybe this migrated to China, but I don't think so. But it's founded in the mid-1980s, and roughly 10 years later, half of the United States had their internet service through this thing called America Online. So it started with nothing. 10 years, half of the population in the US have America Online. Then, this thing came along, which I know has had some challenges in China, sort of moving through its curve, right? Founded 2 10-year curves ago, 1998, so we're 20 years in. Now look at the statistics of what Google does and how much information it processes around it. Some of you probably know this company, Facebook, roughly 10 years in its life cycle. Many, many billions of people on Facebook around the world. And this company I'm a particular fan of. A lot of people like Apple all around the world. Who here has an Apple phone? A good portion of you. Who here has an Apple product in their house? A very good portion of you. The reason why Apple is so successful is because almost everybody in the world has some sort of Apple product in their home. In the US, the average American family owns almost 3 Apple products. Every single family in the US, which is interesting statistic. Okay, so that's kind of the beginnings of our discussion. How is everybody doing? How's everybody doing without their phone? Are you feeling like you got a little break from technology? Maybe? A little relaxation? See how long you can hold out. Don't worry, you'll get it back, I promise. Okay, so this says, really I'm a futurist. Really? What gives me the right to come up here and tell you about the future rather than you coming up here and being the one telling me about the future? So I have to answer this question a lot in front of audiences, and I've sort of thought about it in public and sort of realized what it has come from. So when I was very, very young, we moved our family to this place. Does anybody know what this place is, the map? Yeah. Someone's clapping. There's some other Floridians. My friend Joanna's Floridian. This is a place called Florida in the United States. It's at the very, very bottom. You may not get this joke, but my friends from the US will definitely get this joke. I refer to Florida as the funnel of crazy. Because lots of crazy things happen in the United States of America. And if it gets crazy enough, it finds its way to Florida. Always. Now, in Qingdao, there's an interesting thing I learned, that Qingdao has some a German influence. So we went to the old city and we saw some of the German influence. Now, here's an interesting thing. This is 100% true. There's a game on the internet that you can play. The other place in the world that is almost as crazy as Florida is Germany. And crazy things happen in Germany. So if you want, you can Google, or Yahoo, or Baidu, because you can't use Google here, and Google Florida versus Germany game. And you will see that you will try and predict, did it come from Florida or did it come from Germany, and you'll mostly be wrong. It'll be like, oh, that's Florida, no, it's Germany. Like, crazy things happen, both in Germany and Florida. So I grew up in this land of crazy as a little boy. And when I first was there, this was what I grew up in. It was agriculture. It was growing oranges. It was not the most forward-thinking place in the world. It was actually a little dangerous for a kid like me, who came from a different sort of society. 1 year later, when I was 7 years old, Florida turned from this into this. So I grew up inside this. I grew up literally inside the land of the future. I experimented with things. And I grew up in a culture that represented and was excited about change and wasn't afraid for things to change. Which, by the way, is a lot like China in a lot of ways. China is not afraid of making change, which is why you made so much progress in so many technology areas, because you're happy to do it, you culturally like it. So I grew up in this crazy world. I literally grew up in the land of the future with Walt Disney's vision as a little boy, and ended up working there for many, many years in various capacities, and ended up directing a lot of children's television for these companies. So that was the beginning of my life. And then much later in life, I sort of migrated all that futuristic belief into building products. And I was very, very fortunate to be very, very early on helping create things with Apple that created this thing we call desktop video, which is now very commonplace. Created hard drives that have become very, very popular, and then helped create a movie camera that's very, very popular and used all around the world, including in China. So I've spent many, much time in China. So that's just sort of a short sort of version of how do you get to be a futurist. And then when I retired from the camera company, my friends at this company, 20th Century Fox, another big movie studio, said, would you help us figure out the future? I was like, well, what kind of job is that? What do you exactly want me to do? And they said, well, we don't know. I said, well, who do you want me to do it with? They said, we don't know that either. I said, well, is there any question that I'm going to ask where you're going to have the answer? And they said, not really. You'll have to figure it out. And that was the job. So I said, that's a really interesting job. And I started, and I did 5 years experimenting inside the world of the future at a gigantic movie studio. And then, 5 years later, I migrated into another movie studio, this one. So this is where I work now. So it's a very big, very important movie studio, and we have a division in that studio. It's an official department called the DOF, stands for Department of Future. And inside a movie studio, we think differently. We think about change. We are not afraid to look at things the way they are and ask the question, why exactly is it always that way? Because if we don't ask the question, guess who's going to ask the question? The kids in the garage. And the kids in the garage are going to be way bigger than us if we don't play by their rules. So part of what I do in this Department of Future is try and make this movie studio that's been around for over 100 years think like a startup. Think like, let's go eat ramen today. Dress like this. Think like this. That's part of the reason for it. And we start to see some success. So we're working on all kinds of really interesting things. Okay, ready to watch this? This is kind of interesting. This has sound.
Those who think getting a car phone is not for them, whatever the reason, haven't kept up with the booming industry of cellular radio telephones. Scenes like this are becoming commonplace in U.S. cities where cellular is available today. This revolution in communications could make it possible for more and more people to have a phone in their car, or even one that travels with you. Like this unique cellular portable made by Motorola, which weighs only 30 ounces. Why Right now, businessmen and women are major users of radio telephones where cellular is in service. But more people will take advantage of cellular as its benefits become apparent. Eventually, seeing people using cellular phones may seem as commonplace as someone checking time on an electronic watch, figuring on an electronic calculator, or programming on an electronic computer. Industry watchers say there are only a few thousand cellular phones in use right now, but that number is expected to grow considerably within the next few years during the Cellular Revolution.
So I think this is interesting. It's the beginnings of something where people had an awareness that this was going to matter. What they didn't quite get was that we would pack it all into one thing. That the phone would be the computer, would be the television, would be the radio, would be the music player, would be pretty much anything you could think about. And the ultimate expression of something like that is something like the phenomenon of WeChat, which we all use cross-culturally. That whole group that's sitting over there, we're all on WeChat now. Fully migrated to a Chinese tool, and we found use for it here and overseas, in other places. Okay, so let's talk about this for a minute. So this is an interesting curve. Notice that it sort of looks like a curve, right? So what has happened within the cellular revolution, as we call it, is that the form factor has gone from the compute package being fairly large and a little cumbersome, and the screen itself being very, very small, to the form factor of the compute package being very small and thin, and the form factor of the screen being as large as we possibly can. So we shrink the compute, and we increase the screen. And what we've really done is we've increased the screen to the point of humanity, to the point where it just barely fits in our pocket, right? We made the screen as big as we could, and still it's comfortable to put it in our pocket. That's what it is, right? So in reality, that's what cell phones look like over the last 3 10-year curves. That's 30 years of cell phone technology. All screen, tiny, tiny compute. And you think, okay, well, why is that important to virtual reality? It's very, very important to virtual reality because it's important to our humanity. It's important to what we do. What's going to happen next? Okay. So some of you use an iPhone. 2 years ago, iPhone shipped its 1 billionth device. That's fairly significant. A lot of you use Android phones. There are now 2 billion Android phones running on planet Earth, many of them right here in China. But here's the thing about all this technology, and all the technology you're all holding up to take screen snaps of this and sort of do things. Here's the thing. We haven't really changed all that much in about 40 years. Apple started in the 1970s, now we're 40 years later. The screen, the little thing that we look at, has fundamentally stayed exactly the same. We made it color, we made it smaller, we made it lighter, but the actual use case for an electronic screen has fundamentally not changed all that much. So the reason why there's that big question mark there, the what's next question mark, is I believe, and many of my technology partners and colleagues believe, that we are actually on the cusp now of the next really radical change in imaging and screen delivery. Is that this is changing to something else now. We are finally ready to change it into something else. Now, we all ask, well, what is that else, right? Where are we going? So, what this says is why we're going to wear it. Now, if you look at a lot of the people that are out there with their phones, you're doing this with your phone. You're not doing this. It's very rare that we even talk on our phone like this anymore. This is a terrible phone. It's a great everything else. It's a terrible phone. But really what we've been trying to do for the last about 15 years is we're trying to wear this thing, but we still have to hold it. Now, these are pictures I took last week in Shanghai. Look at what everybody's doing. In our world of technology, we call this the 22-degree rule. This is the 22-degree. Your neck is down at 22 degrees, like this, and you're looking at this thing all day long. Right? These are real pictures of real people. This kid I love the most. He is right in there, man. He is like this. So you have to imagine there's a certain logic to saying, are we sure this is right? Is this the right thing that we should be doing, is holding this thing all day long? don't think anybody could have predicted that we would hold it as long as we do every day, but we do. This was in the airport, Qingdao. I really like this. This is going in my presentation all the time. Because this is an advertisement, and it is pretty clear what they're telling you here, right? This is not a phone. This is a thing you hold up to your face. It is literally in front of his eye. That's a really valuable piece of insight. You can learn a lot from how companies market their products, because they have certain insights about what those products are going to be and why they're doing it. Love this picture. This is definitely part of the talk. Okay, so now, why we're here. We're all here at a virtual reality conference. We're all here to learn about virtual reality. We're all interested in it. We all think there's going to be an industry to this. Eddie and his colleagues are very motivated, put a lot of effort into doing this. And this is where we sit today, right? This is the level of technology of where we sit today. Now, these are extremely valuable devices, but I do not believe by any stretch of the imagination that these are the right devices for the future. This is a period of time where we are marking time and we are pushing really interesting parts of technology, but we're not quite there on the humanities side. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. However, these devices have been considered somewhat successful in the landscape of how we move technology forward. So here's some of the numbers. This is kind of how much they've sold. And I kind of think we're sort of right here. So the reason I brought that Netscape CompuServe slide up, and I said pay attention to CompuServe, is if you look at the numbers that these things have shipped, they're tracking right around that CompuServe kind of number, in the low millions in today's society. That's very important because a lot of people are very worried about the disillusionment of this VR wave and that it's not catching on as fast as people thought. There's been billions of dollars of investment capital poured in, and they're not seeing the returns yet. Well, they're not seeing the returns yet because we're kind of at the CompuServe days. And we're really not even at the AOL days. That's still a few years away. So, from a statistical standpoint, 6 million 2 years ago, about 8 million last year. We're tracking toward about 13 to 14 million devices this year, which is exactly where we should be, based on what the technology costs and some of its limitations. It is not a failure point, this is an absolute success point. This tells me that we are absolutely on the right track. We're not there yet, but we're on the right track. Now, I refer to these devices lovingly as something I would call BOF, and some of you that have seen me talk before know this, so don't cheat. Anybody want to guess what BOF stands for? It stands for box on face. So all these devices are a box on your face. This is not the most advanced piece of technology in the world. This kind of technology has been around for about 60 years in some way, shape, or form. And in earlier iterations, it's been around since the beginning of cinema, where we used to put our head in a little box and look at things. But we evolved past that, right? So where we sit today is not where we're going to sit tomorrow, and that's what I get to study as a futurist. Okay, let's talk a little about content. So this is a very quick reference point, and this could be a whole another hour talk just on the content side of things. But I'm going to give you 5 minutes on this. So all of these are movies that worldwide we will say, these are great movies. If you disagree, you can stand up and put your hand up. But everybody I talk to says this is a great, great movie. These are greatness. They represent the art form at its highest level. These are great television shows in the West. I don't know how many of them have migrated here, but everybody sitting in that far corner would be hard-pressed to tell me that's not great. Every single one of these is great. Poker television, and there's a lot of bad television, but there's a small collection of things that we would say these are great, great television shows. These are great games. Great. From the earliest stages of games, these are cultural phenomenons over 40 years of what gaming means. A lot of you probably play these games, yes? These are important games. Now, if I ask that same question about the art form and the culture and the commerce of virtual reality, we would be hard-pressed to say anything is great, because we're not there yet. Just like the devices are not right yet, the content is not quite right yet. Doesn't mean we're not doing great things. There's some really interesting, beautiful things. There's 50 pieces showing at this conference. 45 of them I think are wonderful. 5 are like, eh, but 45 I think are wonderful. But none of them, I would say, have achieved greatness yet, because we're not there yet. So in the world of VR, these are things that are good. They matter. These are what we call micro hits, or moments in time where people are paying attention. These are pseudo-phenomenons in our business. So these are things that people have played on a relatively large scale in our business, which is still very small. Remember, we sold a small amount of headsets worldwide. Because it's hard. There's a lot of friction to this, right? The one that's kind of now taking the world by storm is this thing up in that far corner called Beat Saber. Anybody play it here? A lot of you, look at that, see? It's a thing, right? It's simple, and it's easy. And more than anything, it connects to your humanity. It doesn't connect to your technology. It ties into your brain in a way that's really fun and interesting. So if you haven't had a chance to play it, play it. These are other ones that I recommend. If you are in the world of virtual reality, I'm going to ask a question. I hope people will raise their hands, don't be shy. Who here has done every single one of these? Put your hand up. And has? 5, so maybe 3% of us. Now, you've come to this VR conference, you spent money and time to be here, but you still have blind spots. You are not really ready to be at this conference unless you've spent, let's call it 35 to 40 hours in these worlds. If you do this, you will have a good sense of what is out there, what is good, what is heading toward greatness. If you don't really know what's going on. It would be like me asking a big movie executive, if I brought up all those movies, and I asked him, when was the last time you saw a movie? And he went, oh, like I went to a conference like 6 months ago and I saw a movie. Like, you don't know anything about movies. You have to do this every single day. I do this every single day, even when I'm traveling. I have a little VR headset that I take with me, an Oculus Go system. So if you're interested in really pursuing this medium, you have to build what we call your sea legs. You have to do this as much as you watch television, as much as you look at your phone. Okay. And by the way, you've been doing this for some time. You might just not realize it. So, who here has played the Nintendo Wii? A lot of people. This was also a cultural phenomenon, right? This was a really interesting step, and the Nintendo Wii does not get enough credit for what it started. So the Nintendo Wii was not a traditional video gaming system. The Nintendo Wii was a simulation system. It created video games that felt real. You didn't play a video game, you could let grandma bowl in the living room. You could play tennis in your living room. And this is the beginnings of something. And part of the reason that VR game Beat Saber is so popular is because it's just like a Wii game. It doesn't have a traditional narrative story, it's not television, it's not a short film, it's a Wii game migrated to VR. And that's why it's so successful. So if you're interested in making money in VR, pay attention to what the Wii did 20 years ago, and think about where VR is going as a medium today, wearing the box on your face, which is going to change. This was what we call spatial entertainment, which is different than immersive, right? We can be immersed in a movie theater. It's a big screen in front of us. This thing is giant, right? I can be immersed in it. But it's different than spatial. Spatial means you're moving around in physical space, or your brain is thinking you are. When you were playing tennis in the Wii, your brain didn't remember that it was watching a television. And the provability of that was when people played the Wii in the early days, they didn't have the little safety straps, and they would get so into it that they would throw the controller into the TV and break the TV. And they had to finally, put straps on it. That was an interesting learning about where this was going, where this medium was going. So now let's look at where we are today. So simulations of entertainment have been the stock and trade of the theme park business. This is where we go to simulate a spatial world. And this is an important step. What we're doing now with virtual reality is a terminology we call location-based entertainment, or LBE for short. We use a term called LBE. This is what LBE sort of looks like. And there's ones in China popping up all over the place. China is very motivated by this kind of content. Today, these are like mini theme parks without the cost, and you can put them in more places. So we can put them in regional cities all around the world. The technology stock and trade of these devices is this kind of thing, which is what we call the backpack PC. This is wrong. It has value. We're using it today, but on the curve, this is not a correct piece of technology. This will not lead us into the future. This is a moment in time that is destined to be like, yeah, that was a good idea for a moment, but not really a good idea. What we're really doing, and where it starts to get interesting, still with the box on the face, but where it gets interesting is we're taking this backpack that we wear to get all that compute power to walk around inside a mini theme park, and we're shrinking it down, and we're shoving it inside the headset. Now things start to get interesting. Because now we're not wearing all this gack on us. We microsized it, and we put it in something that's comfortable. And we've removed the tether. So when you go to the tent, and you'll play the video games, and you'll do the experiences, you'll realize it's a little frustrating because you're always connected to this wire. And that takes you out of the experience. When the wire is gone, and the compute system is packed into the headset and not on your back, it's liberating. It's fantastic. Here's what this looks like. So that's what Facebook is working on next. It's a fully integrated, what we call 6th degree of freedom, fully spatial. I could wear it, I could walk around this stage could be an entertainment experience. Essentially what we're trying to get to is a day that we don't have to go to the theme park, we can bring the theme park to us. We can strap the theme park on our face. That's what these guys are working on. They're not the only ones working on this. There's a lot of people working on this, but this is an important step forward. Now, if you go around the conference here or go to the tent, you'll see a lot of these things. We're evolving, we're getting better, but these are still box on face. But the prices are coming down. This one is particularly interesting from our friends at Facebook. It's under $200. It's really, really good. It's called a 3DOF headset, so it's not the most advanced, but it allows for a really good functionality at a very low cost. And you don't have to put your phone in it anymore. Because you want to keep your phone where you want to keep your phone, not in your headset. This one is unknown. That's the Project Santa Cruz. We don't know what it's going to cost. We don't know when it's going to ship, but it's coming. And I've already been using it and testing it, and it's pretty remarkable. Okay, so what we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes is what I refer to as the brick cell phone days. The reason why I showed you that video of the brick cell phone is this is where we are today. This is a very sort of funny, famous movie in the United States. That's Gordon Gekko. And he was using the brick cell phone. These things are a little ridiculous, but we're working on getting them less ridiculous. That's what people are putting energy into. Now, I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to sort of encapsulate this into something that I think might be valuable for you to benefit from, because I benefit from it. So I talked a lot about this word, the curve, right? I've referenced it 5 or 6 times on my talk. The curve, from wrong to right. I think we're still on the wrong side of the curve for everything that we're doing. The backpack we see, wrong side. The tethered headset, wrong side. The box on face, wrong side. But we're learning how to get right. We're learning how to make it the right thing. So this is the actual scientific formula from the curve from wrong to right. So you want to take pictures? No, don't take it. I'm just making that up. This is just a joke. This is just something I downloaded on Google. It's not. I just see if you guys are buying it. But it's complicated, is the point. It's complicated to get things right. But we're working on it. So give us a wide berth. Give us some time. Give us some energy. Put your passion into this. Because if we get this right, we are never going to use a phone again. The phone will sit in the drawer, just like your PC from 20 years ago, this big box. You're never going to use it again. You're going to have something better. So what's better? Okay, so we talked about virtual. Now we're talking about augmented. Is everybody okay? Do you need a stretch break? Everybody's fine? Do you want to take your phone back now? Everybody swap their phone back? No one can handle it, right? Do you want your phone back? No, she's okay. She's fine. Okay. She's enjoying it, not looking at WeChat for 20 minutes. All right, I want you to watch this.
One more now. Better angle. Oh, check it. Did that come out okay?
That's the best one of the 300 pictures I've taken of myself today.
Every girl in the picture is locked into her phone. Every single one is dialed in. Welcome to parenting in 2015. They're all just completely transfixed by the technology.
David Peralta. Oh, hold on, I'd take a selfie with the hot dog, selfie with the churro, selfie just of a selfie.
Okay. So this is funny, right? These poor girls were being made fun of. Now, there's a story behind this story. Because they were asked to do this as a marketing campaign.
Well, maybe they'll tweet us their
They were asked by a big
photo.
phone company.
Now's the time, fans. Get on the Twitter with a hashtag.
Get on the Twitter, get on the WeChat. Use your phone this way. So they weren't doing that on their own. They were asked to do it. And really, who are these broadcasters kidding? Because what they're doing is watching an augmented version of the game too. They're not really watching the game. They're watching monitors of the game. They're looking at these things. Maybe they'll peer over every now and again. Oh yeah, there's real grass. They don't care. They have this. They have to work. So this is an interesting thing. And we've been augmenting our universe for quite some time. If you're a sports fan like me, we have a boon because sports now have a layer of technology on top of them. I'm a big golf fan. And I love to watch golf and play golf. But it's impossible to watch golf on TV because the ball is so small. But now, they can draw a line and show me where the ball went, and I can enjoy the game more. Every sport has figured this out. These are key leading indicators of what is to come. Our humanity, our society, has already expected and adopted a layer of technology on top of reality. That's what we call augmented reality. By the way, it is broiling hot up here. I should have worn shorts. I was tempted. I'm sure you're hot, but not as hot as me. This thing throws up a lot of heat. Okay. So, beyond the BOF, beyond the box on the face. These are still wrong. These are still on the wrong part of the curve, but they're getting more right. We're starting to get a little more correct about the technology and the humanity and how we're going to use these things. So I asked this very simple question. Is this stuff going to get us here? I doubt it. Not quite. Not quite to the Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft level. But we're getting closer. These things are more exotic, they're harder to come by, they're harder to use right now. We're using them in laboratories, and they're starting to come out into the marketplace. The HoloLens is a real product, it's out in the market. It's expensive, about $3,000. It's mostly used for industrial purposes, not for home video purposes, or entertainment purposes. But these devices are all really interesting. But eventually we're gonna get here. Eventually we're gonna wear something that will make sense. And then we don't need our phone, because we'll have something better than our phone. And that is a massive change in society and how we're going to use it. And by the way, we won't use it all the time right away. People are like, well, when it changes, then everybody's going to be wearing these computer glasses all the time. We're going to see these things constantly. No, because it took you a long time to get to the saturation that you're using this now. The saturation of these devices is massive, the amount of material that we consume all day long by holding it up. But wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to use your hands, if it could just float in front of you? Because I want my hands for other stuff, right? I want to eat my ramen. I don't want to hold this all day long. Remember those kids on the train? So we're getting there. That's our friend Mark Zuckerberg, captain of industry in the US. He says it too, and remember, he's got $2 billion to start. He's probably $5 or $6 billion into this thing with box on the face. And he said very publicly last year, box on the face is not the future. This is the future of VR AR, and he's right. Okay, let me show you what I think is going to happen when we get the phone into the history books. So this is this sort of famous place in Santa Monica called the 3rd Street Promenade. It's a big shopping area. And this is a simulation. Someone said, this is maybe what commerce is going to look like when you get to wear this thing. Now we can do this with a phone today with something we call Magic Window. And a lot of what we call augmented reality lives inside this little box with a screen with a border. That's not the future of augmented reality. The future of augmented reality is not a little box. It's this. It's bringing layers of digital technology into the real world. Just like when I'm watching golf or baseball, I know what's going on. I want to know what's going on in that store. I want to know what the sales are. I want to know what's happening, right? So this is the kind of stuff that a lot of companies are putting a lot of time, money, and energy into. And I would very much suggest, if you're in this business, you put time and energy into figuring this kind of stuff out. And if you want a Tesla, I have a Tesla, it's the most amazing car in the world. And you can see things about it as you're just walking around the street. Okay. This is a really interesting device coming to market relatively soon. This is a bridge device, meaning it still uses your phone, but your phone slaps into this headset and you can augment the world through your phone. So you're no longer looking at it like this, you've taken it away. You've given your hands back. It'll cost under $100, plus the phone, of course. So, now I'm going to talk about the rumor mill. Does everybody understand what I mean by the word rumor? I mean, this isn't true. This is not me telling you things that I might know or not know about certain companies. These are just things that are out there on the internet. But you learn a lot from the internet, from rumors. So there's this company in Northern California called Apple. And you notice that they really haven't talked about any kind of wearable thing. There's been a couple little press leaks about the fact that they're maybe working on something. But I think a lot about this because I'm an Apple guy. I've worked with an Apple computer my whole career. My personal life, my business life is all tied to some sort of Apple compute system. So I'm excited to see what Apple might come up with. What I think about a lot is this device, the watch. Now, I'm not a fan of the watch. I don't really wear a watch because I have a watch in my pocket. The watch, by any standard of any other company on the planet, would be considered a successful product. For Apple, it is not considered a successful product. Did not reach the sales thresholds they wanted, but that's fine. Because the watch is a staging event for Apple. It's a bit of a Trojan horse. Now, I'm just predicting this. You can't quote me, you can't say, oh, he said this about Apple, da 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 da. This is just me, as a futurist, making a prediction about the future. What I know about this device is it's extremely small. It's like a 1 by 1 inch little square. It's extremely powerful. It has a very, very advanced processing system. And most importantly, it has a completely usable operating system packed into a 1 by 1 inch square. You can swipe around on it, you can make phone calls on it, you can listen to music on it, you can watch video on it. You can do anything you can do on your phone in a smaller package or on your wrist. Just not the right place to wear it, on your wrist. But think about it, right? Think about all the stuff you can do with this thing. Think about how tiny it is. And then think about it, and this is just like someone's predictions of what it might look like. This is not what it's probably going to be like in any way, shape, or form. They're just people trolling around on the internet, creating ideas. If you take the amount of tech that's packed in that little thing and spread it out over your eyes, it's going to weigh nothing, it's going to be super powerful, it's going to be super sexy, it's going to be super interesting. And that's the day when you leave your phone at home and you're like, I don't need my phone. I got a better thing. It's all there. I'm good. I think this is going to happen. And I think it's going to happen sooner than you might think. Interesting? Okay. Now, we're getting close to the end of the presentation. Now let's talk a little bit about where things might be going. What's going on? What did I miss? Okay. This is an interesting moment in time. Okay, so there's this crazy company in Florida that I spent a lot of time with called Magic Leap. They're on the cusp of something potentially remarkable. They are really the agents of change. They are figuring things out in a really interesting way. This is a simulation. This is not what the device actually does today, but guess what? This is what the device actually does. And they're very, very close to achieving this. You still have to wear something, but you could see this. This is a thing I've seen in the real world. It looks kind of like this. Kind of like heavy glasses. It still has a little compute pack you have to wear. It still has a wire. But they are developing a chipset and a technology that allows things to be in your perception the way they would be in the real world. So if I was wearing these glasses, which I wear on a regular basis, and I test them to prove them, figure them out, I could put the various presidents of the United States and some chairmen and some other things in here, in these chairs, and my brain would not be able to discern are they really sitting there or not. That's what's happening. That's what's happening, what we're working on. So this company has gotten a lot of flack. They've been around for about 5 years. I've been connected to them from the very beginning, in some way, shape. And at the beginning, they thought, well, we'll show people what we're working on. So they partnered with this big visual effects company called Digital in New Zealand that makes big movie VFX. And they made this simulation of what a Magic Leap device would look like. And they put this out on the internet. This is what it looks like. a few years ago. People were all over this. They were like, this is ridiculous. Of course a VFX company can make that. That's not real. That's not the real thing. And I'm like the 3 people in the world that are like, let me tell you something. Yes, that's a simulation. But this is really what they're doing. No one would believe it. 2 years later, they decided, all right, we're tired of getting all the flack. So they put out a very early video of kind of what it looks like. And if you could read what this says, it says this is shot directly through Magic Leap technology. So they put a camera through the device, which now we know what it looks like. It's kind of these glasses. Now it's a little less sexy than the Weta thing, but this is what it is. You can bring things into your world and manipulate them in any way, shape, or form. It's the next operating system for your humanity. And it's really interesting and very valuable. There's lots of these videos now online. Magic Leap has released more and more, so you can just go Baidu it, Yahoo it, and check it out. Pay very close attention to this company, because they are doing something really interesting. Okay, next steps. So, while Magic Leap is busy working on stuff, while we think Apple's busy working on stuff, while we think Google's busy working on stuff, while we think Microsoft is working on something that's more nimble and better than their original HoloLens, there's also these companies somewhere out in this place called China that are experimenting with new things and accomplishing really interesting goals. So this is a device called the Mix, at this very interesting company called AntVR, which just raises money on Kickstarter. It's a little different than how Magic Leap has raised $2.6 billion to achieve the objective. These guys have raised significantly less than $2.6 billion. But they have an interesting device that has a very, very wide field of view and attaches to Steam. And I've tested it a few times, that's me wearing it. It's really interesting, keep a close eye on this. There's another company called Nreal that a lot of people know about yet, Chinese company. It's building extremely small, extremely lightweight, wearable devices. These things are coming. That's my friend Marcy, who I work with in LA. That's a prototype that's actually a working device. It's almost the size of your glasses now. And remember, we're only 2018, so imagine where we're going to be in 5 years when they keep working on this stuff. This is curving into the right side of the equation. We're getting there. This is the kind of thing you're going to want to buy, not the box on the face. All right, so as we wrap up, I drew this little cartoon because when I was in Shanghai, I was in one of these conferences and there was no translation, so I had to stay awake, so I was drawing. And I drew this little thing and people liked it. This kind of sums up what I just talked about for the last hour. This is industry transformation. In a nutshell, this is what happens, right? At the beginnings of entertainment, we realized we could put images up on a screen. And we asked people to go to the place. That was the movies. That still continues to be a very large, important business, but shrinking. The next wave is we brought here to you. We could give you an experience in your home that was like a movie, but you didn't have to go to the movies. The next wave is we brought here to you, with you, but it was tiny. It's a little thing. Right? We have to mash it up against our face to try and pretend it's big. The next wave is that here is everywhere. When you have a device that you can put on your face that will simulate what you want, when you want it, at the scale you want it, that is a massive sea change. Massive. When it gets right enough to wear it, if I wanted to, I could make the whole back wall of that a movie theater. And that would be a very simple implementation. I could also make this whole room into a giant entertainment experience. And it wouldn't feel small. It would feel gigantic because I mashed it up against my face and I got my arms free. We don't have time to talk about this today, but no futurist would be complete without studying robotics. I do a lot of study around robotics. The only thing I would recommend that you check out is something called the ROS. It stands for the Robot Operating System. There is actually a robot operating system that a company that made a robot decided, because every time people make a new robot, they have to build an operating system from scratch. They're like, well, we don't do that with computers. We have Windows, and we have Mac, and we have Linux. So they've kind of made the Linux of robot. And now you can build a robot from scratch, like that. Which, by the way, brings up all kinds of interesting ethical principles. So just be prepared. This is a whole other talk for another day. Some books. If you still like to do the original virtual reality medium, called reading a book, these are 3 of my favorite books. If you're interested in what we're doing to ourselves as people, and the technology surrounding it, read a book called Future Crimes by an author named Mark Goodman. This is a fascinating study. It's one of the most compelling books I've read in recent memory. If you are interested in doing what I do for a living, this is our Bible. Read a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And if you work in a creative business that is struggling in some way, shape, or form, read Creativity Inc. Every single human that works in the entertainment business should read Creativity Inc. It's Ed Catmull's book, one of the guys that created Pixar. These are like a little mini library of innovation and humanity. Okay, one last thing to watch.
What if a single device could change the way we treat the most common ophthalmic conditions, including cataracts, glaucoma, and macular degeneration, and at the same time provide a platform for the integration of augmented reality? Introducing the Omega Gemini Refractive Capsule, the platform that forever links ophthalmology to high technology. This device is a three-dimensional implant that keeps the capsular bag open, contains a true refractive lens, and maintains an open space for drug delivery, biometric sensors, and additional lens technology.
Who would do that? Nobody? Come on. You do LASIKs. Fix your eyes with LASIKs now. Lasers in your eyes. This is happening. This is not science fiction. This is a real company doing this. And there are many other companies doing this. Google has an initiative like this. So if you think that wearing it is the end of the road, it's not. Because sooner or later in technology curve, we're going to embed it in our bodies. Brings up interesting ethical concerns, but this is happening, whether you want it or not. This is in my wallet. It's really there. It's a fortune from a very famous Chinese restaurant in downtown New York City. With time, the impossible will become the possible. That's what I study. That's what I work on. And if you're curious, so that's the end of the talk. So that's what I recommend. Be brave, take risks, get out there, don't be afraid. And if you're curious to remember all the things I talked about, you can take a picture of this because they drew a cartoon once when I gave a talk, and that's all the stuff I talked about. So they're like, oh yeah, I remember you talked about all that. It's a cartoon. Okay, there you go. Thank you.